Hi everybody, welcome and welcome back. My name is Elisa. If you have never been around here before, I create my own digital sewing patterns that I sell on Etsy. I also pursue the goal of creating my dream wardrobe here on YouTube. And today we're going to do a tutorial for my new sewing pattern, which is the Julie twin set. So like I said, today we're going to do a tutorial, but it could have just as well been a looking like the movies installment because Barbie. I know I'm like 2 years late, but today we're gonna create my Barbie dream outfit in the shape of the Julie twin set. So the Julie twin set is a Chanel type twin set that consists of a jacket that has a bit of a boxy cut, very simple rounded corners around the length of the jacket, 3/4 length sleeves, and optional pockets, faux pockets in the bust area, and then actual pockets down below. We also have a fitted A-line skirt, which I think turned out really great. I'm super happy with the fit of that skirt. That has a waistband and a zipper in the back, plus 2 optional faux pockets in front to match the jacket. Now, this twin set ideally should be made in anything that is a little bit more structured, since this is a tailored look. So anything like denim, stiffer cotton, canvas, and then obviously wool, suiting fabrics, bouclé, tweed, all of those things would look great in the Julie twin set. Today I am using a super fun coral bouclé fabric. The fabric was quite loosely woven, so I had to interface it. For that I used one-sided interfacing that was in the mid-weight range. I don't know the exact weight of it, but it helped hold the weave of the fabric together. So as per usual, if you do buy the sewing pattern, you will receive 4 printable files that you can download and print at home. We have the US letter version of the pattern, we have the European DIN A4 version, which is printed home, and you also have a European DIN A0, which you can bring to the copy shop if you don't want to assemble pages. And you will also receive a pattern introduction sheet, which tells you absolutely everything you need to know about the pattern, plus some very rudimental written step-by-step instructions. However, please consider this tutorial the main instructions for the sewing pattern. All right, and without further ado, let's jump straight in. Okay, so once we have cut the shell, we need to remove our pattern pieces so we can cut the interfacing. But before I do that, I'm actually going to take the step of drawing in all of my darts so that that doesn't get lost, and I can later align everything nicely. Okay, so once our pieces are prepared like this and we have the interfacing on them, we can actually sew in all of our darts. And I have marked the placement of the darts previously so I could nicely align the interfacing with my shell. Now that that's done, we can very clearly see where the dart needs to be placed. So I'm simply folding it accordingly, and then I'm going to sew my darts in. Okay, Okay, so now that we have actually put in all of our darts, we can do some of the fun stuff, which will be that we assemble all of the big pieces of our shell. I'm going to start out with my jacket, and I'm placing the back of the jacket so that the right side is facing up, and then I'm taking the two front sides of the jacket and place them right sides facing down so the right sides are facing. Then I am going to pin and sew my shoulders as well as my side seams before I move on to the sleeves. Alright, so the jacket vest, so to speak, is completed. Now I am going to take my sleeves. You can see that there is a dart in the elbow area on one side, which eventually will also determine which is your left and which is your right sleeve. For starters, let's put the sleeve together like so. You simply fold it in half and you pin and sew the side seam. Okay, so this is what the sleeves look like when they're completely assembled, and it's maybe a little hard for you to see, but you can see the dart here, right? And this gives the sleeve a bit of a shape, and it also determines what's the back and what's the front. So where the dart is the back of the sleeve, meaning that this is my right sleeve and this is my left sleeve, right? And this is how we need to put it into the jacket now. We do it as we always do. I am going to start with one of the armholes, and I'm going to make sure I have good access to it. Then I grab the according sleeve, making sure that the dart is facing in the back. I grab the sleeve inseam, and instead of placing it dead center on the side seam of the jacket, I'm going to pivot it forward by the amount of the seam allowance, so roughly 1 centimeter. I'm going to tilt it forward. Once that is done, you can reach into your jacket, turn it inside out, and fetch the rest of your sleeve. And there is, or you should place, a little notch in the center point of your shoulder curve in the sleeve, and that you can align with the shoulder seam in your jacket. Now you have those two anchor points, you can start to pin in the rest of the sleeve. Now, there will be a little bit of ease, meaning you will have to pin the sleeve back and forth a few times for it to really lie flat in your armhole curve. So you can start by giving it one pass, see how it fits, and just keep going back and forth a few times. And this is what it looks like from the outside, and we can now sew it in. Before I turn it around, I'm going to cut little wedges from my seam allowance to remove some of the bulk, like so. And then I can pop the sleeve back out, and ideally it's in and there's no nicks or creases or pleats sewn in anywhere. And that looks good to me, so I can do the other one now. Alright, so this is the fit of the jacket as it comes. I have made 0 changes to this. Let's talk through it. So the jacket has a bit of a boxy fit. You can see that particularly in the back, because the back is quite straight and there's a bit of a distance between your body and the length of the jacket, and that's intentional. That's part of the oversized design. However, I understand that that might not be everybody's cup of tea, so if you feel like you wanted to take it in just a little bit, you can do that in the side seams. So if you take it in by, say, 1 centimeter, this straightness will tuck in a little bit more, and you're going to have something that's slightly more fitted. The other thing that you could change right now is potentially the height of the neckline. If you feel like it's a little bit too high for you, you could lower it. However, do remember that you will add facing/lining to this, so it's going to be lowered by the amount of your seam allowance anyway. Right now I don't have that here, which is why it looks quite high. And if you do make that change, you have to transfer it from your shell also to your facing. Also check the length of your sleeves. They are going to be about 2 centimeters shorter than they are right now, which is intentional. They're like 3/4 length, which is a little bit 60s inspired. Last but not least, something that you could also have a look at is the height of your armhole right here. So if you feel like that sits a little bit too high in your armpit, you could lower it just a smidge. Also make sure that your shoulder seams are the same length on both sides. Personally, I'm quite happy with the fit of this. I'm not going to make any changes, so we can move on. I'm now going to assemble the skirt. Okay, so to assemble the skirt, we do the same thing as with the jacket. We place the front right sides facing up this time, and the back sides go on right sides facing down, so we can pin and sew our side seams. Okay, so this is the skirt shell, but the skirt also has a waistband which we need to attach. Okay, so here are the pieces for our waistband. We have 2 layers of shell material for the front and 2 layers of shell material for the back, which means for the back we have 4 pieces because this isn't cut on a fold. And also in the back we have an overlap that is only relevant for one side, meaning that you can remove 2 layers like this and then cut back 2 like that, because you only need that overlap on one side. That's the overlap that's going to hold your button. It's also written down in fine print on the pattern. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to assemble these things with each other. So I grab one of the front layers and then the relevant back layers. And what's maybe also important to point out here is that you can, if you want to, interface these layers depending on your fabric. I might do that still, but for now I'm just gonna assemble my pieces. Right, so this is one layer, and now you can see the overlap here going to the other side, so that eventually we have this little balcony that we need for our button. Now we do the same thing here. What's also important is that you need to mirror the way you attach things. So you have the overlap here on the right side, and then consequently you have to swap sides on the other piece because they will be overturned with each other. And that is so that your seam allowances and all of those things face the right way when you eventually want to put everything together. If you're not sure what I'm saying right here, just pin your stuff together, open it, and then check if you can place it right sides touching like this. And now everything is pinned. You are going to sew a rectangle around the upper edge of your waistband. So basically up the sides and along the top, and you're going to leave the bottom open. And now we do the same old spiel, which is that we understitch. So you open up what you've just sewn and fold the seam allowance on one side and top stitch it. And now I'm going to press. Okay, so let's talk about the lining. You have extra facing pieces that you can use to finish everything, but whether you can finish your garment with facing or you need to use facing and lining depends on the fabric you're using. If, say for example, you use denim, then you can get away with just using the facing. If you use something like tweed or bouclé or wool like me, then you might probably go and want to line it. Now, to cut your lining pieces, all you need is to reuse your skirt pieces as well as your sleeve. And for the bodice of the jacket, you can see these lines here which outline your facing, which you have to remove to get just the lining part of the jacket. And the same thing is true up here in the neck of the back and down below here. So what I do now is I cut these sections off. And this leaves me with just the pieces I need for my lining. So technically speaking, you have a second set of your facing pieces here, but the reason I put them separately on the printing file is for those of you who don't want to use lining, so you can just have the facing pieces separate. And now these are the pieces that I need for the jacket of the lining, plus the sleeve and the skirt. So I'm going to cut these now. So these are all of my lining pieces, and I will now go ahead and place all of the darts as I have done in the shell into my lining. Okay, so once the darts are in, we can fetch the pieces we need, plus our facing pieces. So the facing pieces you will have cut from your actual shell material. And now we need to go ahead and piece everything together, basically completing the puzzle so that we can have an inner layer and an outer layer. So let's start with the simpler one, which is the back side. So you can see here that the neckline in the back is quite large, and that is because we have a matching piece from our shell that goes in here. So I start by placing everything right sides touching, and then I go around the curve bit by bit. After this, I'm going to follow up with the according piece for the bottom of the back that goes on here. And after that, I can move on to the front. Okay, now we can pop back and front, right sides touching, to create the vest that will eventually be the inside of our jacket. We do it the exact same way as we have done it with the shell. Do make sure that these seams here align just for a nice look and match, so your shoulders and your side seams. And then you can follow up by inserting your sleeves to complete this step and complete the inner life of your jacket. Okay, so let's continue with the skirt. We have the skirt shell, which is still open and looks like this from the outside and is faced, or interfaced rather, from the inside. And we have the lining skirt. Now, I'm just going to show you what I mean in the instructions of the pattern when I say that the skirt needs to be shorter than the shell. So you can see I have my two front darts here, and I align them with the two front darts in the shell. And I make sure the seam allowance up here is flush. And then when I show you the length of the skirt, you can see here that it's about 2 centimeters shorter than the shell. And this will ensure that the lining pulls the shell inward and upward, so it doesn't show the lining on the outside. So what we can do now is we place the lining right sides touching with the shell, and then we go ahead and pin it to the length of the skirt so that the seam allowance is flush down here and it's shorter up here. And again, later we are going to pull this up in the pressing process, in the ironing process, and then it's going to pull the hem inside and up. So I'm just going to place a couple of safety pins so things are not moving too much. And we need to make sure that we have not too much ease in any given place, right? So these two things need to be matching up. Okay, so now I'm going to place a basting stitch down here. The next step is to take this to your iron, unfold it like this, and turn it right side out so that you can go ahead and understitch this. But if you're not too sure, just leave it as it is. It doesn't have to be understitched. Okay, so once you have pressed the hem, look at this delicious little piece of candy. We have now a perfectly overturned hem, which will always hold the lining in place so it doesn't show on the outside, and you have a perfectly clean hem from the outside as well. Nice! Now that that is done, we can go ahead and actually baste the waist once, and that is just so we keep everything in place and we can remove those needles, so it's easier for us to actually attach the waistband. So let's quickly do that. Again, I'm using a basting stitch here, and I'm using only half of my seam allowance so I can be sure that the basting stitch is like hidden away later. Alright, so the next step ideally would be to insert your zipper. You do have a notch in the center back in the pattern, which tells you how long the zipper needs to be. This would make it about 20 centimeters long, and you also have to think that the waistband comes on top of that, so your total opening in the back is about 25 centimeters tall, which should be enough for you to get in and out. What I have here is a plastic zipper, and I'm going to measure about 24 centimeters down from the upper edge. That includes the seam allowance that I need, and this is where I'm going to shorten the zip. So I'm going to put this into my sewing machine, sew over here a couple of times. This only works with a plastic zipper, don't do this with a metal zipper. Then I cut the zipper short, and now I am going to grab a lighter, use that to melt it down into the shape I need it to be. So now I have my shortened zipper. I'm gonna place it in. And the way to do this, first of all, is to close the center back up until the notch on your pattern. And that is because we obviously need to make sure that the hem is even and equal. So for that, you are going to place the back side onto each other like this. And you have to make sure that the end of the lining kisses each other in the perfect alignment. And once you have that, you can pin closed the back in the shell as well as in the lining. Again, I'm using a relatively big stitch length here because I'm working with quite roughly woven fabric and lots of layers, so it doesn't have to be tightly sewn. And this also, in case you make any mistakes, allows you to fix them later on. So make sure you honor your seam allowance in the back, which will be more than the rest of your piece, around 2 centimeters. Okay, so now you can pop everything back out and you will find that your backside is now closed neatly, both on the outside as well as on the inside, up until your notch point. Perfectly completed. Give it a good press. Now that that is all done, you have the opening to put your zipper in. So let's do that. To place the zipper, place it right sides touching down. Make sure the end of your zipper tape is flush with your seam allowance because you do need that later to attach your lining. When you pin it down, make sure you don't catch your lining. Let it roam freely and just pin down the zipper onto the shell. Now baste that first side down. Same thing on the other side. So now you can guide the opposite side of the zipper tape to the other side of the opening. And again, do the same thing, pinning it down, but making sure you only catch the shell and not the lining. So to have easy access, just open the zipper this time. So once the zipper is basted in, you can give the skirt a try, check if it works for you. If it does, you can go ahead and sew it in properly by giving it a second row of stitches closer to the teeth to make it truly invisible. With the main part of the skirt all completed, looking perfectly ready to be worn, we only need to attach our waistband now. So the waistband has an inside and an outside depending on where you understitched it. Meaning you will have to make sure that you place the right side onto the right side facing down, just to orient yourself, and then you flip it over. So actually the left side and the left side are facing, because we're going to attach the inner layer of the waistband first, so we later can top stitch it from the outside rather than the other way around. So it's very well possible that if you have made any changes to your skirt at all, meaning you've taken it in anywhere, maybe in the back or in the sides, you might have to adjust your waistband now as well. What we do is we start by aligning the center front. So I'm placing the center front notch onto the center front notch of the skirt. And then we move over to those side seams. There's a little bit of ease you can see here, but it's not a big amount. And especially if you work with loosely woven fabric like this, it might be that you feel like, ooh, why is this waistband so much wider than the skirt? It isn't actually, it's just that it's much more loose because the skirt is held together with the lining as well. So you basically just have to hold the waistband in a little bit. The more pins you use, the easier it will be. And then we go to the back. And now here, it's essential that we make sure that we align everything nicely, right? So this is my side where I have the overlap for my button, and as far as I can tell, it looks like it pans out perfectly. So I'm aligning the end at the edge of my zipper here with the notch that is in the waistband. And then I go ahead and pin everything else down. So that works out nicely. And let's check the other side. And also that seems to check out nicely. Okay, perfect fit. Didn't have to change anything because I didn't make any changes in the fitting process either, so it works out nicely. Okay, so now that we have attached the inner layer of the waistband, let's remove all of the pins. And when we now plop this up and over, you can see that the waistband slowly emerges. It's nicely finished on the inside, but let's give it a press. Okay, so I made a small mistake and I'm willing to share with you because this is a tutorial and we're here to learn. Everything's fine, but with everything I've showed you now, what you would end up with is this, which is a problem because you need to be able to fold this in and over later to have a nice finish, and this keeps you from doing that. So what it needs to look like is like that, right? So no biggie. I'm just gonna go back in here and open that last little bit of the seam that I've just placed, like that, just like the first 2-3 centimeters. And then I just go in and make sure I fold this back in so it's nice from the outside, and then I fold this in and under so it's already positioned for me to do my hand stitches later. No kerfuffle. Right? So this is what you want it to look like. And then you do the same thing again, fold this back over, place it like so. Ow! Jesus. And then you can sew this back on, ideally without pricking your finger. The next thing you want to make sure is that when you close your zipper, things are perfectly even at the same height, right? So when they overlap, you don't have like something like that or something like that. It needs to be the same. And when you do feel like it is, good, because then we can move on. And this is where double-sided interfacing comes to play, and I'll show you at my ironing station. What we have here now is that the seam allowance is facing into the waistband. We fold this over and under eventually. This is how it's going to go. But the first step for me is I'm going to use some fusible interfacing. This particularly is actually just hemming web. You could use different type of fusible interfacing. You could use your paper pieces to cut the pieces you need for the waistband from the fusible interfacing you have. I'm just going to plop that in here and press it down, so then I have about this much amount left to play with, and I can fold that under like this. And that just helps to, you know, make the waistband a little bit more flush and cohesive. And you have now the choice to either simply top stitch this and you're done, or you sew it by hand, which is my preferred method because it's just so seamless and you keep having the beautiful untouched inside. So that's my preference. And in the process of hand sewing that outside down, I'm also going to sew the lining down like I explained earlier, like this, to give it a super nice neat finish. I'm going to do that at the end of the whole project. Okay, so to finish the jacket, what we need to do is to fetch our lining, which is joined with the shell, as we can see, and our actual jacket. Now I'm placing the jacket so that I have easy access and the right side is facing up, and then I grab my lining and I place it the right side facing down. Then we can go ahead and start to align the entire outline of the neckline, the center front, and the length of the jacket. So I'm going to start with the center front on one side, and what we need to make sure is that important seams match up. So that would be particularly the shoulder seams and our center back notches. Before I pin the rest of the outline, I'm actually going to sew the neck because I want to understitch the neckline. I'm not going to understitch anything else, just the neck hole. Before I take this to my iron, I'm going to snip the seam allowance basically all around to make sure that I have no tension when I turn this over. Okay, so now once this is pressed and snipped and everything, I move on to doing the rest of the outline of the jacket. So going back in, pinning everything all the way around. Right, so now that we have this little parcel right here, you can see that the sleeves that are still unfinished, they're protruding out of this little parcel in the back, right? So we can close this a little further, but you do want to make sure that you leave about a 20 to 25 centimeter section open here so you can finish your sleeves later. That's important. And now I go ahead and sew these sections closed before I move on to my sleeves. Now I'm going to cut back the edges up here like this, and I'm going to also cut wedges from the curve in the center front at the length/hem of the jacket, more or less like this. And now when we turn everything around through the hole that we left, we get a beautiful jacket. Oof. There we go. Just push your sleeves through, and as you can can see, the jacket emerges, which needs a very good press now. The jacket is pressed and it looks good. And now I'm going to show you how to finish your sleeve like this. So you can already see that this one side is closed off completely and looks super neat and nice. To do this on the other side, when you have your lining inside the sleeve, go into the hole that you left in the hem, slide your hand through your sleeve. So you basically have your hand between the lining and the shell, so to speak, and come through here. And then grab your sleeve inseam for both lining and shell and place them between your thumb and index finger so that they're right sides facing like this, right? And then you just pull everything out like that. Keep a hold with your fingers as you've placed them. And then start to pin around the opening of your sleeve. And this way, even if you sew all around and you close it off, you can be sure that you can turn everything right sides out again without any kerfuffle or having to be worried that you created some sort of maze that you can't navigate. So simply pin around the cuff, and now you can sew around this. Now we have this, which looks totally confusing, but I promise you, when you now go in here and then pull everything right sides out, you will find a beautifully finished cuff. Who would have thunk? And now I just need to go and press it. And then we are actually done with construction and we can focus on the decorative bits. I still have the opening here, right? I've just pressed this and I'm gonna use some fusible interfacing to close it for now. And then later when I do my hand sewing work, I'm gonna go in here and close this off properly. But for now, I'm just gonna glue it shut basically. Okay, so now I have prepped all of my pockets, the actual pockets and the faux pocket flaps. We can put them together and there's like multiple ways you can go about this. I would recommend trying a placement first and then trying the jacket on. For now, it's all about finding the right placement for all of our pockets. And you will find a suggested placement on your paper pattern, so I would recommend you check that out. And I have, as you can see here, prepared all of my overturned button flaps. The way these go on is like this. So we have two faux flaps around the breast area, and then we have the normal pockets without the flaps below. You could change it up. You could potentially, if you wanted to, do it like this, or you could put them down here. You have creative freedom doing this. And this is how they're gonna go on. Now take your tape measure and then start measuring things out, and then try on your jacket and see how you like the look of it. and that is it for today. What do you think about the Julie twin set? I am obviously quite proud of it. I have been working on this for a very long time. It's a big step outside of my usual grounds, because if you do check out my Etsy shop, you will see that I have a gazillion dresses available, but not so much any jackets or skirts or trousers, but we'll get to that at a later point. So for me, this has been a real challenge and an expansion of my offering on Etsy. I'm super happy with it. I hope you give it a go. I hope you consider getting the Julie twin set for yourself. As per usual, this pattern has obviously been tested with lots of different people with different body types to ensure the perfect fit. If you do make the Julie twin set, please consider sharing it with me. Either do that via an Etsy review, or if you are on Instagram and you're happy to post, please tag me at Thrills and Stitches, or use the hashtag Julie twin set Thrills and Stitches. And that is it for me today. See you next time. Bye bye.